Morning. I'm Mark Livingston, Regional Vice President at Export Development Canada. It is truly our pleasure to be back, a platinum partner of the 15th Annual Vancouver Island Economic Summit and a sponsoring partner of this morning's plenary session. The summit is an annual gathering of business, community, and government leaders collaborating to add vitality to the Vancouver Island economy. And this effort remains critically important as we all continue to navigate our way through the pandemic and continue to focus on our economic recovery. Export Development Canada's mandate is to help Canadian companies succeed on the world stage. And as international risk experts, we equip Canadian companies with the tools they need to grow their business and with confidence. Underlying our support is a commitment to inclusive, sustainable, and responsible business. Related to this morning's plenary session, I'd like to share with you details on the recent formation of the BETTER initiative. BETTER stands for Business, Economic, and Trade Recovery. It includes all national trade-related government organizations who are working together to help Canadian business succeed internationally. Its objective is a robust economic recovery and long-term inclusive growth for Canada, focusing on 3 economic sectors. And I'm pleased to share that EDC is leading out on the Agri-Food, Ag-Tech sectors. As you may know, EDC is now physically present on the island. However, we encourage you in the meantime to enjoy our virtual booth at the summit and know that we're here to support you. Thank you. Enjoy the session and enjoy the rest of your conference. Take care.
Hello, everyone. My name is Joe Perkins from CHEK News. I'm coming to you from our studio here in Victoria, and joining us all the way from Halifax is the food doctor, Dr. Sylvain Charlebois, the Senior Director of the Agri-Food Analytics Lab at Dalhousie University. Sylvain, thank you for being here. It's great to speak with you again, and it's good to see you.
My pleasure, Joe.
We have seen your face several times over the last few years. You are the go-to voice for food in this country. It seems over the last 18 months of this pandemic, we've seen a lot of you talking about food in this country. It hasn't been easy for the food distribution across this great nation of ours. We've seen climate change issues. We've seen food supply issues. How would you characterize, just to start, it's a broad question, but how would you characterize the last 18 months?
Where do we start? Well, first of all, I want to thank the organization committee for inviting me. It's always a privilege to talk to people who are part of the food industry, or maybe part of the food industry, or care about the food industry. We owe a big thank you to all of them, really, all of you, essentially. I've been at this for 25 years, and I must say the last 18, 20 months have been incredible. I've been so impressed by how the food industry overall in Canada has performed from both ends of the food continuum, really. I mean, you can look at farmers and processors, and they've really worked hard to make sure that Canada remained food secure, given all the complexities that came with the pandemic. So I was really impressed. But if you ask me, Joe, whether or not we're going to go back to how things were before the pandemic, I don't think so. I think that rules have changed dramatically, and I think fundamentally the entire supply chain, I think, is now way more democratized. People want to transact with everyone. They have more. They know they have more options. They can deal with farmers. They want to deal with farmers. They want to deal with processors directly. Heck, Kraft Heinz in Toronto is now operating 2 restaurants. I mean, those are things I never would have thought ever before the pandemic. So, and grocers, of course, are trying to retain market shares, and of course, restaurants have been devastated by the pandemic, and they're living through this great reset, if you will. And so it's going to be quite interesting. I'm actually, even though it's been very difficult over the last 20 months for everyone in the food industry, I'm slowly exiting the pandemic feeling quite optimistic. And when I think of Vancouver Island specifically, I think there are a lot of a lot of opportunities because now people want to engage with food systems, with different stakeholders in the food system, and their relationship with food has changed and will continue to change as well.
I want to talk about some of those opportunities on the island, but let's go back to you talked about the rules. You say the rules have changed over the last 18 months. How have they changed?
Well, before the pandemic, it was funny because everyone kind of thought they had a role to play. They had a nod in the supply chain. I'm a processor. I'm a farmer.
Mhm.
I'm a distributor. I'm an agent. I'm a restaurant, and everything is now way more foggy. I mean, there are a lot of opportunities. I was talking to a group of farmers in Southern Ontario, I think 2 weeks ago, and they're trying to get together to create a ghost kitchen, farmers. Okay. And so I want, if there are farmers listening to us today, you want to think about, how the supply chain can help you. How can it help your competitive advantage? And this is what I'm talking about. Rules aren't the same. They're being redesigned, reconfigured. And of course there's e-commerce. Everything is more accessible than before. And I know that an economy like the island is challenging logistically, but right next door to us, there's Canada's Food Island, PEI, and they're doing some wonders. They're now selling beef, a lot of beef in Toronto, in the GTA. If you go to some places, some key places in Toronto, they'll showcase PEI beef, and they only have 130,000 people there. It's incredible what is possible now.
When you say everything's more accessible, what do you mean by that? Do you mean, I mean, if we take Vancouver Island, we have some large grocery chains.
Yep.
And there are some island products in those chains. We have a lot of smaller grocery stores that have more island product. And then we have, the markets, and they're full of island grown products. When you say things are more accessible, is it easier for an island farmer to get his product into the bigger chains, or are they just rethinking how they get products to consumers? You talk about ghost kitchens and setting up their own markets on their own land. What do you mean by more accessible?
I would say, I mean, I know that that local food is in, and more people are thinking about local food, and Vancouver Island has its own campaign,
Yeah.
which I understand is very successful. But I've been on the website, and I'll be completely honest with you. I was a little underwhelmed by the website that I visited to showcase products to islanders, and frankly, we need to think bigger, broader. If you want to offer good products to islanders, you need to think about servicing other markets as well. And so when I went on your website, I thought, well, this may be great, but I don't, I'm in Halifax, or I used to be in Ontario and Quebec, and I wouldn't relate to that. And I think the one question that we have to ask ourselves on the island is what are we known for, or what do we want to be known for?
Well,
What are we good at?
you're
And
talking about island good, correct?
that's
What.
right. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah,
And that, is something very close to the Vancouver Island Economic Alliance. They set that up.
I know.
Let me
I
let me push back a little bit, Sylvain. I mean, here on the island, I think the pandemic proved that people want to support local. They feared that this pandemic
and there's
might.
nothing wrong with that.
And no, nothing wrong with that. But I think that businesses want to tell their consumers, look, we're local, we're made here, we sell here. And I think it actually, for the most part, it works because there's a huge population of people on the island that want to buy local. They see the logo, this is an island good product, it's made here. They like that. So what's wrong with catering their messaging to islanders? I mean, are you saying that, if they want to get more bang for the buck, they need to do it outside of the island? I mean, I don't see anything wrong with what they're doing.
No, there's nothing wrong. It's
Yeah.
just not. It's just not far. It doesn't go far enough. I think
Okay.
it should go, because you want. I would want to know, if I buy a product from Vancouver Island, what am I getting? And I should be part of your market. It's
Mm.
not just the island. I mean, let's be honest here. You have a very small population, and to build economies of scale, and you're looking into food hubs as well on the island, and which is a concept that I think has merit. I think you want to think about the market. The other thing that we need to be honest about is not all things on the island are good.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Come on, Sylvain. Hold on. Remember
we
who you're talking to.
but listen, there are a lot of things in Nova Scotia that we produce that is not that good. I mean, but there are things that are very good, and
Right,
we're trying to build a strategy around some of the things that we do very well, so we can sell to British Columbians, we
right.
can sell to people in the prairies and so on. I think you understand what I'm saying, Joe. But this is really the thing that we're pushing governments to think about. Local is good, but I know for a fact that local means something different for for Vancouver Island than say the prairies or even here in the Atlantic. In the Atlantic, if it's made in Canada, it's local, not on the island. On the
Yeah.
island, it has to be from the island, which is the same as PI. Canada's Food Island is this. I'm using PI as an example a lot today because I think there's a lot of similarities, but Canada's Food Island, because they only have 130,000 people, they had to think beyond the island, they had to think about, and so people in Halifax, some people in Montreal, some people in Toronto are looking for PI stuff. And I
Right.
think this is something you need to think about when it comes to branding the island itself, Vancouver Island.
So if I have a local food business and I think that by branding myself local, that's going to be a key marketing tool and that's going to help bring me in a few more dollars, are you saying that's not enough? You need to do more than that. Maybe it's one piece of the puzzle, but slapping on a sticker that says "Made on Vancouver Island" might not be enough.
In BC, according to our numbers, 25% of consumers are willing to buy local no matter what.
Right.
That's 25% of the market. Okay.
Regardless of whether it says local or not. Yeah, they just okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, we're talking about the 75% here. Okay. And,
Yeah.
and I think you need to think about the 75% in order to make it happen. And frankly, I'm a big believer in innovation and economic growth through agri-food, because I mean, the agri-food sector is so poised to generate wealth, create jobs in rural communities. It's the best industry to do it.
Right.
And the British Columbian, I mean, the government actually would recognize that for sure. And so this
So
is important to think about.
let me stop you. So prices are going up, correct?
Yeah,
Food prices across the board are going up, right? It's costing more. For those producers, I imagine many of them are going to pass those costs on to the consumer. It's gonna cost people more to get their food. We know that. So how does someone, in your opinion, try to grow a business and keep customers coming back? Because I think that there's this narrative on the island that, look, if you have a business, you're in the food industry, you want to get ahead, you want to get a leg up on your competition. I do think what we're talking about, telling folks you're local, that is what people think will get them ahead of their competition. And I'm just not sure, based on this discussion, whether that's enough. If your prices are
it's
going
not
up,
enough.
well, then what do people need to do, right? How do they get people to continue to buy that piece of chicken if it has gone up by $2? They can slap a sticker on and say, look, it's local, and hope that people will say, well, I want to support local, and so I'm going to pay that $2. But it sounds like that's not enough. That isn't.
I've been on the island several times,
Yeah.
and people are proud to be on the island. And there's this ecosystem on the island. There's just je ne sais quoi, there's really a feeling that is totally different on any island, really. And it's the same on Vancouver Island. And actually, I did spend a whole summer there many years ago, but still there's a different feel for sure, and people are proud of that feel, and of course it shows in how they make food choices. But that can only do so much for you and for your economy. And that's why I think you need to think beyond that. If you really want to build a solid economy, you have to look at. I've actually had the pleasure to be part of some panels in BC over the last 18 months, and I've heard a lot about food hubs and the way that British Columbians or the province itself values processing. That's your anchor piece. That is absolutely. If you don't build processing on the island, it's hard to support farmers. It's hard to do everything, really. It's harder.
What do you
And
mean by
so
that, Sylvain? Processing.
in processing, that's where innovation happens. Processing is what you do with commodities. That's how you add value. Whether it's, if you grow mustard grains, you make mustard. If you have beef, then you basically process beef and you turn them into all sorts of different food products.
Right.
That's, to me, that's the key. In the prairies right now, there is PIC, a super cluster, Protein Industries Canada. That's exactly what they're doing. They're actually building, they're not building just plants, they're building value chains to value pulses grown in Canada, in the prairies in particular. So that we've seen investments across the board. We've seen companies like Lovingly, Nestle, Rocket from Europe. We've seen Merit Foods. All these companies have invested in the prairies in the last 2 years because of the supercluster, because of that cluster of knowledge that has been built as a result of PIC, which is something I think the island should be thinking about. Going back to my first point, what is Vancouver Island good at when it comes to food? What are the things that Vancouver Island is good at? And frankly, when I look at your website, I'm still asking myself that question. I have no idea. Like, what would I buy first, second, and third coming from the island?
So
I don't know.
that's interesting. So you're saying, from a guy in Halifax right now looking at Vancouver. I mean, you can look at the prairies and they've got grain, and you can work your way across the country and have food known for that part of the country. But you're telling me that right now, when you look at Vancouver Island, there's not one product that stands out to you. You don't know if it's fish or seaweed or honey, or it just you don't know.
Well, I, 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 I'm sure that most of these products are very good, but how do you build a brand? Like, how do you build? Is 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 Vancouver Island a brand? Is the local movement a brand? I mean, those are, and right now I'm not sure it is managed like a brand.
Mm.
Going back to, I mean, right now I would say Aliment Québec in Quebec is managed like a brand. Canada's Food Island is managed like a brand. Foodland Ontario is managed like a brand, and there are songs, and of course they have more money, but still, I mean, there's something that needs to be recognized there, and of course you build an infrastructure around processing in order to support farmers to grow what you need, to grow the ingredients you need, and then basically carry on and develop markets. And through that branding, you can create that pull effect to develop, a market inland in BC and in the prairies and perhaps even Ontario and in the United States and so on and so forth. I think I think we need to think big here. And as Canadians, we often don't do that. Unfortunately, when you think about food security, we only think about feeding our own. And we just think that consumers will show up because it's from here. Well, sure, but to sustain the movement, to sustain what we're doing, all the investments being poured in, whether it's from the government or from the private sector, you need to think beyond that.
Let's switch gears a little bit. This past summer, we saw firsthand the effects of climate change. We had farmers here on the island, their crops were decimated. And I think it clearly demonstrated to everyone that we're not immune to the effects of climate change. And I'm curious what you think we can take away from that. What did we learn moving forward about food production? Do we need to have contingency plans in place? Do we need to plan for this in the future? Was there a takeaway when we looked at this past summer?
Uh, well, past several summers, I mean, this summer was an explanation point, really. I mean, 49.5 degrees in Linton. I mean, that's an attention grabber for sure. I would say I mean, what we're hearing from other provinces are things like control environment agriculture projects, vertical farming, greenhouses, and to stabilize, to control the effects of Mother Nature essentially, and to assure that there is going to be some production capacity maintained in certain regions. New Brunswick is a perfect example of how vulnerable a market can be. New Brunswick produces 3% of all the produce consumed in the province.
Hmm.
3%. That's it. So they woke up. I mean, a result they didn't go through the summer you guys had,
Right.
but they did go through blockades, and they went through, the pandemic and the panic buying like everyone else, and they realized, my goodness, we need to produce more produce in this province, and that's kind of why we got involved with the province, and their goal is to produce 20% of course it's you can't really produce everything, but they've made a strategic commitment to produce more tomatoes, cucumbers, and leafy greens. So very strategic, very pointed, and that's what they want to do for New Brunswick. They have enough potatoes, they have enough seafood. Let's focus on other things. Now, in your case, on Vancouver Island, that you have to think about that because of climate change, I think. I mean, it is an island, and it costs. I remember every time I go on the island, I mean, prices are actually much higher than the average across the country. And so, if you want to stabilize systems, you have to produce more. And I'm going back to my processing soapbox. I mean, if you actually do have a good harvest, you have strong harvest, you always have processing to create that pull effect. So
Mhm.
farmers know they can actually rely on the market as a result of these food hubs. That's the thing. But all of these projects are capital intensive, as you know.
You know, you,
So who
you keep
invests?
you keep mentioning food hubs, and one thing that I've noticed here on the island recently is this idea of the co-op business model. People working together, businesses working with one another. We're starting to see way more of it in the food sector. You know, you see it with shared office spaces. You've got people that won't be going back to their office post pandemic. So they're creating these sort of shared spaces. I know you know what I'm talking about, but we're seeing
Yep.
it in the food sector. You know, just yesterday I was in this new. It's only been open a few weeks in Victoria, and it's basically a shared cafe where the kitchen's used by different businesses at night. They share the shelf space. So, do you think that is the future? Because I think for a lot of smaller island businesses, and maybe our branding is poor because we have so many businesses, and the scale is so small right now. Like
Yep.
that I think defines Vancouver Island's food industry quite well. There's a lot of small players, great products, but they're smaller. And maybe they're not known outside of Vancouver Island. But the key for them is this co op model, working together, sharing facilities. Do you think that we're going to see a shift to that going forward?
I'm a big I don't think you even knew that I'm a big fan of the co-op movement.
Oh, really?
Cooperatives tend to do very well in agri-food, and because they tend to do well when it comes to risk management.
Right.
And we just talked about climate change. You look at co-ops across the country; they've done very well the last 2 years. By the way, even in 2008, 2009, with the financial crisis, they all did very well because they take risks differently. Now, I'm going to give you a piece of stat that I think listeners need to know. We just did analysis a couple of weeks ago on the work from home phenomena, because everyone is asking themselves, how will the workforce look like as we exit this pandemic? Well, we believe that by 2025, 70% of the Canadian workforce will be working at least 5 days a month at home.
Hmm.
Okay. So when you think about, that's basically 1 day a week, essentially. And so this is a lot, because a lot of people have noticed that technologies can work. We can talk to each other. You're on the West Coast, I'm on the East Coast. We're talking to each other. It Technologies work. And on top of that, companies on Bay Street in Toronto have noticed that they can actually make more money when people are at home. They're more efficient. I mean, we work longer hours, which means that our relationship with food will change. I mean, let's face it, if you're home more often, you're going to consume differently. You're going to probably spend less time in restaurants. You're not going to have as many meetings, but all of the co-op projects you're talking about in Victoria on the island are really a product of what's to come. And co-ops tend to be very flexible to these massive societal changes that we're about to see right now. A lot of employers are wondering where are their staff is going to be, but a lot of grocers are wondering where their stores are going to be. Restaurants are wondering where they're going to be as well. And you need to know where people are going to be most of the time. That's really the key here. And when you think about Vancouver Island specifically, I mean, I would say that really this could bring a lot of business to the island. Like, who doesn't want to live in Vancouver on Vancouver Island? It's a
There we
great.
got a compliment. Okay, I love it.
Well, seriously, I mean, it's a great place to live. And I suspect that with this real estate bubble, you
Yeah.
guys weren't immune to what's been happening across the Western world because your address don't matter as much as before the pandemic. So if you live on the island, well, you're gonna have to buy food. And so there's probably I'm expecting Vancouver Island to benefit from the new work from home normal, if you
Yeah.
will, that we're about to see in a few years from now.
I agree. I think it's the future, the co-op model. I mean, it's not going away. I want to ask you about seafood, but before we get there, when we see you in the news, it's more often than not to talk about the rising cost of food. And we've heard you talk about the price of beef going up. I believe feed for chickens is going up. Therefore, the cost of chicken is going up. Rapid fire, very quickly. Like,
Yep.
let's go over like 5 items that you think will go up in price over the next year or two. We've already said beef and chicken. What else are you keeping an eye on?
Generally, animal proteins.
Okay.
Oh yeah. Why? Well, because animal proteins are more vulnerable when you think about the entire supply chain. You're just one drought away from seeing prices go up. You're always one currency war away from seeing things shift. The feed to the food, the fuel to food, or the food to fuel debate that comes back every now and then. Uh, Often if impacts animal proteins. You're seeing it this year. I mean, most products are up 8, 12%.
Mm.
Some beef cuts are up 30%. And frankly, as we put a price on carbon, as we commit to put an actual price on carbon, and not just in Canada, across the Western world, I actually do see the case to eat more animal proteins weaken
Yeah.
over time. I actually do see what we're seeing in our numbers is that most Canadians aren't giving up on animal proteins, but they're certainly reducing the amount they consume.
Well,
So
how does this shake out for seafood? I mean, fishing is such an integral part of life and industry here on the
yeah,
island. So what does that look like for the fishermen out there?
well, it's the same as here. I mean, actually, I think there's a lot of potential for seafood in general. The price point has always been prohibitive for consumers. It hasn't been. I don't know what I haven't looked at consumption data on the island for seafood,
Mm.
but here in the East Coast, it's not great. I mean, we fish a lot. I mean, the lobster industry in Nova Scotia is worth $1.5 billion now, but we ship it all in Asia, and so it's great, which is great. But at the end of the day, we're not consuming as much. But my guess, as animal protein prices go up, I actually do think that perhaps fish and seafood will become more interesting. The other sector that we're seeing some interest in is seaweed.
Yeah.
And I know that you guys have seaweed. I'm sure
Seaweed
you do.
aquaculture's growing fast here on the
Yeah.
island.
I'm not surprised actually, because it is a big way of generating growth from the ocean economy per se, and there's going to be more demand for seaweed overall, I think,
Well,
as it becomes more known.
Sylvain, I think we just figured it out. You know, why would you come to the island for food? What are you going for? You're coming for seaweed. I mean, everybody knows West Coast seaweed. It's better than that East Coast seaweed, right?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, what is the difference? I don't know what the difference.
Neither
I'm not
do
a
I.
seaweed
Neither do
expert.
I. Yeah.
So let's figure it out. I can tell you for a fact, Joe, that every day there's an aircraft filled with lobster leaving the Halifax International Airport. It's flown out, goes to China, and a lot of that lobster is sold as American lobster.
Hmm.
Okay. Why? Because we haven't branded the Canadian lobster in Asia all that well. And frankly, if you talk to fishermen here, people in industry,